Hello, everyone. It's Lionel Sander from Pembroke Publishing. Thanks for joining us this evening or afternoon, depending on where you are in our country. It's great to have you come together for an hour with a conversation with several of our authors around literacy. And I will be monitoring the chat. So if you do have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. And then we've left kind of 5 or 10 minutes at the end of both sessions, which are about 20 minutes or so long, to have a bit of a conversation and bring your questions forward. So the main way of communicating with the authors is in the chat bar. And you'll see we've just asked you to say hello, so you know how that works. And I just looked down on the chat and saw that Anne and Mary's biggest fan is online. So Stephanie, great to have you here as well too. And as I said at the start, if there are any technical issues, just drop a note in the chat and I'll help you out on the side as well. So with that, we'll get started. So it's my honor and pleasure to first introduce two presenters. First is Anne Elliott. And Anne is on my right, and she'll probably give a little wave or something. So if those of you that haven't met Anne will know who she is. She has a Master of Education from the University of Western Ontario. She's taught grades from kindergarten to grade 8. She has shared her passion and knowledge with teachers as a literacy learning coordinator, literacy coach, and a librarian. She's the author of teacher resources and school board documents and has a proven commitment to literacy education, and that's reflected in the number of speaking engagements she's done across North America, including today. And Anne calls London, Ontario as home, and as we were talking earlier before, is enjoying the fall like all of us, I guess, with the nice warm weather and everything, though we're inside for the next hour or so. And joining Anne is her co-presenter, Mary Lynch. Mary, for the last 30 years, has taught everything from JK to grade 6, has served as a reading support teacher and a literacy coach. She's a thoughtful speaker on literacy and the content areas. She has earned her Master's of Education from the University of Western Ontario as well. She also is a instructor there in the Teacher Ed program. Mary remains grounded in effective practice by working regularly with teachers in their elementary classrooms. And Mary lives in St. Thomas, Ontario. And while I've never been there, Mary, I do know that you've got a great railway museum. And so it's on my list to go check out when COVID is over. So it's great to have both of you here today. We're looking forward to the session. So welcome, and I'll pass the virtual mic over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for welcoming us and giving us such a nice greeting. We are super excited to be with all of you tonight. This is a different forum for Mary and I. We're used to speaking in front of a crowd and an audience, so it's a little awkward to be looking at yourself and having things in front of you that you want to make sure you don't forget and that you highlight during the presentation. But we couldn't be more thankful that you've chosen to give up your time to spend an evening with us, talking about something that we're super passionate about. I see some of the names in the chat, so I know some of the people who are here. So you are already aware that Mary and I have been friends for almost 15 years. And that started when Mary and I were literacy coaches. And I think one of the things that really defines most teachers, but certainly Mary and I, and our biggest fan over there is Stephanie Cook, is that we love to get together with colleagues. We love to get together with friends and talk. We talk about kids, we talk about teaching, but more than anything, we talk about literacy. We talk about what we can do each and every day to inspire and motivate the kids in front of us to care more deeply as they become readers and as they become writers. And so our first pet project really was about reading. Mary and I returned to the classroom after working in system roles in our school board. And we had lots of questions. We had lots of wonderings. We were trying things out in our classrooms. And, you know, like any good teacher, you start talking at the photocopier. And we were sharing some of the great strategies that we were trying in our classroom that we were really getting some success with, really gaining some momentum. And talking just at the photocopier led to, hey, could you share that at a division meeting? Can you share that at a staff meeting? Can you share that at a session that the board's hosting? And before you know it, Mary and I have turned all of that thinking into a book called Cultivating Readers. Well, a few years later, Pembroke came calling, asking if we would be willing to create a companion text, which is the one that we're really excited to talk about today, which is Cultivating Writers. We really believe that these two texts kind of mirror one another in terms of what the focus is. And so if you've checked out the first one, I think you'll be really excited to read our second newest publication called Cultivating Writers. I think as teachers, we're all driven by questions. We have an insatiable desire to know and to understand not only the students in our classroom, but what's the most effective and best practice to lead to the results we want, which is overall student success. And for us, over the last number of years, the question that's really driven us is, what does it mean to be a complete writer? What is it that we're really looking for in our students, that we would look at them and say, that is someone who is a complete, fulfilled, passionate writer. So for a second, I'm going to ask you to think to yourself, what is that? What would that look like in your classroom? What would those attributes and characteristics be that you would use to describe that child in your class? Well, if you're like us, most of your thinking is grounded in sound pedagogy and practice, because we know that when you have sound pedagogy and you have sound practice, you merge those two fields of understanding together and you have informed professional judgment. So that means you make good decisions every day for the kids in your classroom based on those two fields of understanding. So if you're like us, you've probably used lots of different things: professional development, professional learning sessions, ministry documents, as well as ridden on the coattails of these incredible literacy leaders across North America. And those people really inspired Mary and I and motivated us to really think outside the box to answer that question. What does it mean to be a complete writer? So I'm going to ask you to kind of activate that background knowledge that you've already been thinking about for that question. And I bet many of you are thinking that a complete writer is someone who certainly has the skills. And when I say the word skill, I wonder what's coming to mind for you. Is it writing process? Do they know how to generate ideas, organize ideas, draft, revise, edit? The forms of writing, do they understand how varied those are? Do they understand the various formats that they can write in? Do they know the traits of writing and how they all work together to create a very effective piece? Do they know about craft techniques? And do they write with a sense of purpose? What are they trying to achieve? And an audience in mind? Well, Mary and I were really pleased to see that our students certainly had those skills. We kind of celebrated and we're quite excited that we had achieved a measure of success because our students were able to do those things because of our explicit instruction and modeling. But at the same time, we were kind of left with this sense of dismay and sometimes really disheartened to see that we didn't have students in front of us who were necessarily enthusiastic. We didn't have students who were really passionate. They weren't writing in their spare time. They didn't write without a teacher there to give them the topic or the idea. They also didn't necessarily see value in the process of writing, meaning revising and editing a piece of work. So really, we started to talk about the fact that we didn't see really willful writers in our classrooms. We didn't have students in front of us who had the interest, the attitude, the motivation, and that level of engagement that would make them not only a skillful, but a willful writer. And for us, those two things really have to come together to be a complete reader and writer, because what good are the skills if you don't have the will? So when we think about our curriculum, Mary and I were kind of dismayed, sitting back saying, like, what did we miss? Like, what have we left out? We've got kids that are really skillful, but did we forget to put that in our long-range plans about will? Did we forget to put that into our day book? What are we missing? So in Ontario, we've got our curriculum, we went back to it, and we started to see, let's pour through those expectations. So did you know that there's actually 75 language expectations? How many of those do you think actually target writing? How many specifically target the skills of writing? And how many of those expectations specifically target will? Well, there are 25 writing expectations, and there are zero, zilch, none that target will. They all target skill. So it's not surprising, Mary, that we didn't have that in our lesson plans and in our long-range plans. But it did leave us with a sense of saying, we don't really have complete readers or writers in our class if we don't have kids with the skill and the will. So how do we bring that together? If we've invested time, effort, and energy in teaching the skills, and we've seen high levels of success with our students, could we actually do the same thing with will? Could we put forth the time, the effort, the energy, and explicit instruction and teach will just like we taught skill?
Right, Anne. And while our Ontario curriculum doesn't specifically address will, we knew from our classroom experience, Anne and I both, that proficient readers do not automatically become willful readers. Skill instruction just wasn't enough. And that is when we realized that if we were to achieve our dream of building passionate writers, that we were going to have to address this specifically in our explicit instruction. And with the best interests of our students at heart, we knew that it was our duty and our obligation to create these classroom communities where our students would flourish into writers. We don't have to look any further than our EQAO standardized testing in Ontario to see a snapshot of our students as writers. And if you look at the data over the last 5 or 6 years, you will see that our students, the majority of our students, are proficient writers by the end of grade 6. And as Anne has mentioned, that's a cause for celebration. We need to celebrate that. We've worked hard to achieve that. But at the same time, if we dig into the student questionnaire and look at the information that's collected directly from our students there, we see a slightly different picture. And that is that when our students are asked if they enjoy writing, if they like writing, that their sentiments toward it lag consistently and alarmingly behind their proficiency. Our students are proficient, but not willful. And this situation becomes quite urgent when one considers all the benefits of writing. Writing is a powerful tool, and the cognitive and academic benefits of being a writer are well documented in the research. Writing enhances our critical and creative thinking. It increases our ability to understand deeply, and it facilitates the formulation and clarity of our ideas. Beyond this, though, it has been shown that writing can have very important health and mental and emotional benefits. Just look at the number of people who in our current global pandemic have been compelled to pick up the pencil and to check in on someone else and make a connection, to express their thoughts and feelings on the page, or to simply document the history that we're living. As Aunt Lamont says, though, in her book Bird by Bird, where she speaks of her writer's life, writing is about making connections. It's about making sense of the lives we're leading. It's about validation and representation we receive when we put our voice out there. The benefits of writing to our students are far-reaching and long-lasting. And so, having done our research, Anne and I headed back to our classrooms, determined to create classroom communities where our students flourished as writers and embraced their lives as writers. And Cultivating Writers is a result of this journey. In our book, in this text, we have compiled our ideas, activities, mini lessons that we developed and that have been tested and refined in classrooms. We organize this book around what we call our essential beliefs, things you have to do as a teacher to help your students become engaged writers. And because each of these beliefs is important, we have dedicated a chapter each one. So what are those beliefs? Well, the first one is you have to develop your writing life. We are the writing role models in our classrooms, and that requires us to cultivate the writer in ourselves. We have to tap into our students' lives to intimately know their preferences and their attitudes toward writing. We have to model the habits of a writer, those routines and actions that are going to set our students up for success. And we have to make the why of writing visible in ways that we don't simply tell our students, but we show them, we provide them with opportunities to experience firsthand the power of writing. And we have to provide them with the tools of the trade, the spaces and places and the materials they need to write. And finally, we have to nourish the will to write. It's not a one and done. It's not a project that we focus on the first couple of weeks of school. It's something that we have to come back and we have to nourish all year long with our writers. And so let's start recognizing that we are the reading role models, or the writing role models in the school, in the classrooms. Let's take a little temperature check of ourselves. Who are you as a writer? Just take a minute. How would you describe yourself as a writer? Are you someone who writes regularly? Maybe you have a journal where you journal, you document your experiences, your thoughts and your feelings on a regular basis. Or maybe you find most of your writing would be work-related or functional writing. Perhaps you're someone who would like to write if you had more time. Or maybe you are of the sentiment, I'd rather chew tinfoil. Regardless of who you are as a writer right now, the truth is, in the schools, we are the writing role models. We are the writing teachers, and that requires certain things of us. We learned from Donald Graves, world-renowned educator who has written prolifically on writing with children. We learned from him that the most effective way for us to learn anything really is in the presence of an experienced mentor, someone who has done the work and knows the way. And in the classroom, in the schools, it's us, the classroom teachers, the teacher librarians, the administrators. We have to be the ones who have done the work and know the way so that we can provide the most effective instruction for our students. And so the truth is, you've got to develop your writing life and you've got to share it with your students. And so right now, I'd like to share quickly, I'd like to share an activity from this chapter in Cultivating Writers called Natural Wonders. We are surrounded with the beauty of the natural world every day. But how often do we rush from commitment to commitment, work, activity, and barely notice what the wonder of the world around us? Ralph Fletcher, author, you may have read his work. He's done a lot of work in writing notebooks. He tells us that the difference between writers and non-writers is that writers live their lives with their eyes wide open. They notice and they react. So let's make it our intention to do just that, to notice and react. Notable moments, memorable moments can be as small as a robin tugging tirelessly at a reluctant worm in your front lawn, or maybe the busy bee who you're watching meander from flower to flower in your garden. Or memorable moments can be as large as the wildebeest migration across the Kenyan savannah. Big and small, both are equally amazing. So let's make it, So let's tune into nature, activate our senses, and transfer those natural marvels onto the page. Right now in Ontario, we are in the midst of a spectacular fall. The colors are out in all their glory. It's like Mother Nature is knocking at our door. Accept the invitation to get outside and enjoy and explore. I might suggest that you take your phone in your pocket so that when something catches your eye, you can snap a quick picture or make a little voice memo recording to yourself for later. I rarely go anywhere without my little notepad. It's so small, it fits in a pocket. I can tuck in a little pencil with it. And whenever something captures my attention, I take a minute to jot a few words or a couple phrases about it. And then my idea is safely preserved, just like a seed, waiting for me later when I have time to write about it in my writer's notebook.
And I think it's a perfect opportunity right now with what we're facing during the global pandemic, where so many students need time to get outside. I'm currently an administrator in a school in London, and we know that students are really benefiting from multiple opportunities throughout the day to get out, to have a mass break, and also just to be mindful and to be outside. And so I know I've had conversations with many staff members about the fact that these are prime opportunities to really be getting students to hone their skills, to kind of live with their eyes wide open or live with all their senses turned on. The next strategy Mary and I want to quickly move on to, because we want to kind of equip you with a few fun strategies that you can take back and use in your classroom even tomorrow, is tapping into your students' lives. We are in September, trying everything we can to kind of unlock and uncover who the students are in our classrooms. You've got a brand new set of faces in front of you, and we've really got to quickly figure out how we can form connections, but also build a classroom community that's built on the premise that we are all readers and we are all writers. What can we do? So this next activity is one thing that we have had a lot of success with, is getting to kind of figure out who our kids are very quickly. Hospitals have got it figured out. They triage patients efficiently, effectively, and are able to diagnose who needs to be seen first and who can maybe wait a little bit longer. We need to do the exact same thing in our classrooms. We need to get our finger on the pulse of who are those students that we need to be investing time and energy in right off the hop, in terms of their preferences and habits as writers, that we need to maybe turn the trajectory on them, maybe their attitude around writing. So let's steal a page from their book, because the stakes are high, just like they are in hospitals. The stakes are high for us too. We have a short window of opportunity to work with the students in our classroom, and we want to grasp that as quickly as we can. The one activity that Mary and I have had a ton of success with is an I am a writer who poem. It really calls on students to use that frame, I am a writer who, to begin to start to recognize their own habits, their own characteristics and preferences. And this allows you to have your students create a writing profile about themselves that kind of gets them to tell you in a very efficient and effective way, rather than necessarily holding an individual writing conference with every student. You can use the results from the I'm a Writer Who conference, poem for a conference, but it's a quick way to get your students to share information with you. So it's low stakes. We use question stems for classroom discussion. You might consider putting them around on anchor charts around the room. And some of the questions we ask students to mindfully consider are, where do you like to write? Do you have a spot that you like to write in? What topics do you like to write about? Where do you get your ideas for writing? What do you do as a writer to be successful? And what are your favorite genres and formats to write? Mary and I have always been pleasantly surprised by the level of transparency and candor in which students offer us when they answer those questions. And of course, we talk through each question, we deconstruct it, and we model our own thinking, and maybe even populate that part with a few ideas. But those anchor charts really serve as a space where students can take ideas to create their own poems. Here's an example of Isabel's poem. Take a read of that for a second and see what kind of jumps off the page at you. Line 1 and 3 stood out to me immediately when Isabel shared this poem with me. I am a writer who likes to write about things I do and people in my life. Kids need to know very quickly, and Isabel already does, that her life is the endless source of writing potential. That she needs to know that she can harness all those things that happened throughout her day and the people she knows and the places she's been for an endless source of writing opportunities. Does she know that those memoir pieces or those recounts are actually two types of formats and genres that she can be writing in? Line number 3, I'm a writer who doesn't like to make changes to my writing, always kind of hits me right in the heart. Because I've always subscribed to the adage, like Kelly Gallagher, the literacy leader from California, says, kids have to get things down. They cannot censor themselves, just downdraft writing, get it down on paper, and then we will revise, then we will edit. Is Isabel confused? Does she think making changes to her writing is editing, like spelling and grammar and punctuation? Does she really know the power and the purpose of revision? That is when the real writing really takes place, where we put all of that flair and craft in. I don't know, but that's certainly a conversation I'm going to have with Isabel, because I want her to understand the purpose and power that revision really holds. And I've got to model that for her. Here's some other things that we've uncovered from students. So these are just from a bunch of different student I Am a Writer Who poems, but take a quick read there to see some of the other things that students have told us about themselves. What's really powerful with this technique is to do it at the beginning of the year, next week, or maybe you've already done it if you've got the book, but to invest in doing it 8 weeks from now, 12 weeks from now, and having students extend their thinking by saying, I used to, but now. I used to think this as a writer, but now I think. It's powerful to save those poems, pull them out 12 weeks from now after explicit instruction, after you've built a powerful community that cares about writing, and ask students to read their original poem and see how they've changed and how they've grown. We really want students to be on that path of recognizing that they are going to change and grow as writers in this community that cares. Unforgettable people and pets is also another really great strategy that I'm going to quickly highlight. The purpose is for kids to really start thinking that people and pets are written on our hearts and they're in our minds. And we want to harness those people and use them in our writing. So all we ask students to do is to take a piece of paper and divide it into 4 sections: family, neighbor, pets, and mentors. And we ask them questions, purposeful questions in each section. And you could do this over a number of days. Each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you could have students complete 1 square. And then on Friday, have them pick one particular idea that they want to explode into a full piece. But just kind of looking at the family box for a second, let's get you thinking for a second. Who's there for you? Who cheers you on? Who's always there when the chips are down? Who's that person that makes you laugh till you cry? Or when you say their name, it makes your eyes light up. Those are typically those people that are really close to our heart, our family and friends. Who would those people be for you? For me, a person who checks all of those boxes is my 98-year-old Aunt Betty. And look at her there. We brought some kindergartens over to the retirement community where she lives. And we did a really cool activity with some birds. And she was the first one raising her hand to get up to the front so that she could put this incredible raven on her arm. I could write endless stories about Betty. And I want to use her as a source of writing. And she comes up again and again. Kids often will find that we need to help them discover that there are unforgettable people. There are unforgettable places, there are unforgettable pets that will just pepper our writing on a regular basis because they really are written on our heart. So that's a really quick strategy that you could try with your kids as well. I'm mindful of the time. I'm recognizing we started a little late and we've got to move on to Q&A. But closing, I really just want to talk about the fact that, Mary and I really believe cultivating communities where kids care about writing and are invested in writing, we must take time to not only teach skills, we have to teach will. We want to get our kids to embrace those essential beliefs and those essential habits of what it means to be a complete writer. And we really believe that some of the strategies and ideas and lessons and activities that we feature in the book are really going to set you on a firm foundation of being able to do that with the students in your classrooms. We're working and living in very uncharted times, unprecedented times. I'm kind of tired of that term. I hear that every day, but I really do think that during these difficult times, it's really important for us as practitioners, as educators, to really anchor ourselves to what we know to be true. And you have tacit knowledge, but you also have gut instinct. And you know what's best for your kids, and you know what's best practice. And I think that with all the noise that's going on right now, it's really time to invest and anchor ourselves in building relationships with our kids based on care, comfort, and community. And this text, Cultivating Writers, is really going to set you up to be able to do that.
Thanks, Anne. And before we turn you back over to Lionel, Anne and I, we just want to thank you for tuning in tonight, for making time to join us. We know your schedules are busy, and it means a lot to us that you have taken the time out of your busy schedule to be here tonight. If you're interested, you like what you heard, you're interested in learning more, please check out our books that Pembroke has published, Cultivating Readers and Writers. We'd like to thank Lionel, who just came up on the screen, for managing the tech side of this so expertly. We've been in good hands. And of course, we want to thank Pembroke, our publisher, for supporting us in our ideas and helping us bring our ideas out into the world. It's our pleasure to be here tonight with you, and to be presenting alongside Karen, who shares our passion for writing. Engagement with our students. And so on that note, Lionel, we'll turn things over to you.
That's great. Thanks, Anne and Mary. And just before I say thank you, there's a few comments in the chat, but one thing that was sort of struck with me, and you didn't mention, is I'm guessing that all of us on here today are pretty passionate and supportive about writing and, the reading and the writing, the literacy pieces, regardless of where you are in the country. And so everything you're taking, I can see it working in the classroom, but there seems to be a theme in there as well that this could be a whole school doing this. Like, is that kind of, you never mentioned that at all. So is that just assumed, or is that kind of the long-term vision that someone takes and goes, wait a minute, this would work for everyone in the school?
And as an administrator, do you want to kind of share
your
dream?
Yes, I'm laughing because I saw some of the names, and so some of my colleagues are actually on the chat, which I think is hilarious, which I'm so thankful for. So thank you guys for joining tonight. But Lionel, actually, I'm running a professional learning series with our staff, on our first book, Cultivating Readers, because there's something very powerful when you create momentum. Right. And that teachers can build on that. I think oftentimes I once heard Donalyn Miller say that she felt the perfect conditions in her classroom where kids cared about reading. And she built this elaborate greenhouse in her mind. And she sent them off the next year to the next class. And then kids would say, we don't read anymore. We don't do anything next door. And we don't have any good books or time to read. And Donalyn actually said, I was upset at my colleague, but she said, then I kind of realized that in reality, if kids had the inherent will, the inherent desire and motivation, it wouldn't matter who was in the class next door, who was teaching, they would have that. I agree with that, but I do think there's something powerful that we can surround kids in a community that values and embraces these kind of tenets and beliefs. So, if a whole school took this on, I would be very happy. Wouldn't you, Mary?
I would. That's like the ultimate dream.
Perfect. Good. Well, on behalf of everyone here today, Anne and Mary, thank you so much for taking the time. And you'll see in the comments there, people are saying the same thing, that it was great to spend the last half hour with you and just capture your passion and energy and be able to take that into our classrooms tomorrow and through the rest of the school year. So thank you very much. And we really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, everybody.
I know. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. We're going to move on to part 2 of our session today of Writing with Passion and Purpose. And our second presenter today is Karen Filewych, and it's my pleasure to introduce Karen. Karen comes to us with more than 20 years of educational experience as an elementary teacher, school administrator, and language arts consultant. In 2007, she completed her Master's of Education with a focus in the area of literacy. Within her busy life, professional life, which includes writing, teaching, and presenting at workshops to teachers, she somehow finds time in there to manage her website, Words Change Worlds, which highlight the power of words and provide teachers with regular book reviews and teaching ideas. So I think over the next 20 to 25 minutes, there'll be a nice sort of bridge between what Anne and Mary were talking about and their passion for literacy. As we move into Karen, we'll be building on that. So Karen, I know you call Edmonton, Alberta home, so welcome.
Thank you very much.
And I'll pass the virtual mic over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lionel. I appreciate it. Yes, I can tell it was such a wonderful pairing when I heard that Mary and Anne were going to be presenting in the same webinar, because we certainly do share the same passion for writing. And my biggest challenge today is going to be to share all I want to share with you in the short time that we have. I present on writing regularly, and in fact, the topic that we're going to talk about today, I have presented full day workshops on. So today is just going to be a little bit of a snippet, but I'm very happy to have you with us wherever you happen to be in the country. So we're going to start by, I'm going to share this quote with you, which I encountered when I was doing my master's. And at the time that I was doing my master's, I was teaching grade 6. And I remember being exhausted when I would go up to the University of Alberta in the evening for class, you know, tired after a day of teaching. And then there would be a transformation for me, because the learning that we were doing was so exhilarating for me. And I was able to apply what I was doing right then and there in my classroom the very next day. And I remember coming upon this quote from Mem Fox and thinking, yes, this is what I want for my students. I do not want my students to see themselves as writers just within the classroom walls. I want them to see themselves as writers, as Mary and Anne have eloquently expressed as well. I want them to see themselves as writers in my classroom and beyond, this year and beyond. So before we get any further, I'm actually going to show you a very, very short video. And what I would like you to do today while you're watching this video is make some observations about little Jake Boone. If you haven't encountered Jake Boone before, I guarantee you'll want to be Googling him afterwards and looking up his other YouTube videos, because he's just darn adorable. But I really want you to think about Jake Boone in the context of what we're talking about today. And I invite you in the chat to share some of your observations as the video is going on or near the end of the video. So with that, I'll let Lionel play the video for us. Thank you.
Eggs. Strawberries.
Strawberries and wells.
Milk and cheese.
We need milk and cheese wells.
Spaghetti.
We need spaghetti wells.
Taco stuff.
We need taco stuff wells.
Bananas.
We need bananas wells.
More potatoes.
We need more potatoes. What?
Lettuce.
Wells.
And tomatoes.
We need lettuce and tomatoes. Wells.
I think that's it.
No, it ain't. We got some more.
What?
More. Well, so.
I think we got, I don't know, what else do you need?
What else do we need, my daddy?
All right. So when we look at little Jake Boone, as someone has already started to say in the chat, absolutely, he sees the purpose of writing. So he's motivated to write. We have a little one who wants to enter the world of the literate. And as you can tell, he's not there yet. If you could see what he was doing, he was drawing little circles on his page, but he absolutely wants to enter this world of the literate. And he sees that there's a function to writing, a very real function. And in fact, he doesn't want it to end. That ain't it, right? He wants there to be more. Now, when I think about little Jake Boone, and then I think about some of the students in my classroom, there's a difference. So when we think about whatever grade we teach, and I saw at the beginning some of the various different grade levels that we have, for those of you who are teaching the younger students, very likely you have fewer reluctant writers in your classroom because the students are excited about entering the world of the literate. And yet, sadly, even as early as grade 1, we do have students who are already beginning to be reluctant writers. The higher the grades we teach, likely wherever we are in the country, we're experiencing more and more reluctant writers. And that's what I noticed when I was teaching grade 6. I had a lot of reluctant writers in my room. And my goal was to figure out, okay, what can I do to engage them in writing? What can I do to help them to see the purpose of writing, just like little Jake Boone sees the purpose of writing? When you look at the reasons here, these are reasons that I have heard from students over and over and over again. And it doesn't really matter the grade level. They're going to articulate something similar to this. All of them, bottom line, comes down to a lack of confidence in writing. That's often what it comes down to. So how do we counter that? Now, I am going to talk to you today about free writing. And when we think about free writing, very simply put, I want you to think about it as continuous writing. It has other definitions and is sometimes used in a different way, but today, the way that we're approaching it is continuous writing, where our pen or pencil doesn't stop. Now, that seems awfully daunting when we're thinking about how do we do that with our students? How do we ensure that they continuously write? I can't get them to write anything, let alone write continuously. Resources that I first used to encounter free writing were actually the two that you see on the screen now. Now, I was reading these as a writer myself, not as a teacher. These were things that I was using to help me to become a better writer. And so when I started utilizing the free writing, I thought, if this works for me, why wouldn't it work for my reluctant writers in my classroom? So I thought I would give it a try. It was so successful that I ended up writing my first book on the topic of how to get students to write. Free writing was one chapter within the entire book. So I have a chapter on narrative writing, a chapter on journal writing, a chapter on poetry, all the different genres that we have. But the free writing, not only did I find it so successful, but so were so many teachers across the country. And because of that, I ended up writing the second book, which you see there, which is Free Writing with Purpose. And as you're going to see, free writing took a different spin than I expected it to in my classroom. And so Free Writing with Purpose actually has, the first part of it deals with the language arts classroom, writing within the language arts classroom, how we utilize these free writes within our language arts classroom to motivate, but also then eventually to teach some skills. And then I also decided to use free writing in all other subject areas. And Lionel mentioned about school-wide. This too is so powerful when you have everyone in the school who is free writing. And I have many schools who are doing that now. I do in-servicing with whole staffs, and then everybody in the school is using the same method, and the benefits of that are profound. When we think about this notion of free writing, one of the most important aspects is what we see here in this quote: to gain your own voice, you have to forget about having it heard. If we believe that everything we have to speak has to be perfect, we would be very reluctant to speak, because there'd be that worry, that constant worry that we have to be perfect. The same is true with our writing, and our student writing in particular. So when we're thinking about our free writes, on any given free write, I give my students the option of sharing all, some, or none. That's a refrain they hear me use often in the classroom: all, some, or none. And we call this the low stakes writing for a reason, right? Because they know that they're going to have some control over whether or not we share this particular free write. Now, how do we do this? How do we ensure that our students are writing continuously? Because we could give our students a topic, we could give them a prompt. That doesn't mean they're going to write continuously. So the trick is this: we give our students a short prompt, such as "I remember," and when we do so, we tell them to write the first thing that comes to mind. So I model, I talk it through with them this first time through, right? So if I write "I remember," I might say to them, first thing that comes to mind: I remember when I took my dog for a walk this morning. And then it wasn't very eventful. There's not much else to say, but I want my students to get into their head that first thing that comes to mind, they put on paper. So if my brain stops, therefore my hand stops, nothing else to say about the walk I took with my dog, the trick is I write "I remember" again. I don't stop. I don't reread. I write, I remember again, and the first thing that comes to mind. Now, the second time, and I'm very deliberate, by the way, in what I model, because the second time I might say, I remember the trip I took to Maui. So saying a trip, saying something that, students could relate to like that also plants little seeds for when they start to do their own writing. So all of a sudden, when I write, I remember the trip we took to Maui, I have a lot to say about that trip. Now, it's really important that our students realize they don't have to write I remember at the beginning of every sentence. They only do that if they're stuck. So if I end up writing 3 paragraphs on my trip to Maui and, then time is up, great. You don't have to keep writing the prompt. Some students misunderstand that if we're not clear about that. The other thing that we need to make sure that we set the stage for them is that they're not going to read over their work as they write it. As adults, we do that all the time. Kids do that too, but it's a real good stalling tactic is what it is, right? So what we want is no rereading. You're going to see how we build that into the process afterwards, and no censoring. And the censoring piece is also important when we think about that idea of saying you can decide if you're going to share all, some, or none. If I have a student who writes, I remember, and the first thing that comes to mind is I remember the fight my parents had this morning. If they think that I, as their teacher, am going to read it, they're probably not going to write that. If they think that I, as their teacher, am going to assess this piece of writing, they're definitely not going to write that. But yet, how therapeutic would it be for them to write about that situation this morning? Giving them that refrain, all, some, or none. Remember, you don't have to share, you can share. That's going to be freeing for them. The other thing that students find especially freeing is that they don't have to worry about perfect spelling, punctuation, those sorts of things. What I tell them is we're going to focus. Peter Elbow talks about the critical thinking brain and the creative thinking brain. During our free write, we're going to let the creative thinking brain take over. We're going to turn that critical thinking brain off. The critical thinking brain is that part of the brain that tells us, don't write that, you don't know how to spell that. Don't write that, your teacher doesn't want to know that. Don't write that, you don't want your teacher to, whatever, right? Shut off that critical thinking brain, and we can always turn that critical thinking brain back on afterwards. Now, when we think about the length of time, because I build this up with students, when I say we're going to write continuously, and then I build it up with them, I say, how long do you think we're going to write? And I do this no matter the grade it is, by the way. And it's funny because the little ones have no concept of time, for one thing, and they'll say, an hour, but even the older ones, they assume that we're going to be writing a lot longer than the 6 or 7 minutes. So then when I do say 6 or 7 minutes, I make it very manageable. No, only 6 or 7 minutes, that's all. Now, here's what's interesting about our time frame, despite the grade level you teach. I noticed that we have some primary teachers and we have all the way up to our junior high teachers. I would use the same 6 or 7 minutes as a guideline, regardless of the grade level that you're teaching. If you think about those little ones, it takes them longer to actually formulate the words, and the printing itself takes longer. But with the older ones, you want to ensure success for all. And in the free writing situation, success for all is simply continuous writing to begin with. That's the most important thing. So 6 or 7 minutes, you can actually write a whole lot in 6 or 7 minutes. It's surprising what can actually be done. Don't push it too much beyond that ever. Even as you build that stamina with them, goal, success for all. For some students, it's going to be hard to ever push through more than 8, 9, 10 minutes. And you'll see, once you get used to doing it, there's actually no need to do that. They can always go back and work on something later. But the actual process of free writing, we want to keep manageable so it's successful for them. I really encourage you to write with your students. We think writing makes us vulnerable. We know it makes us vulnerable. It makes our students vulnerable, so let's make ourselves vulnerable along with them, right? And it sets the tone, absolutely sets the tone. Like they realize that we're serious. What do you think I'm doing while you're writing? And, their answers are hilarious too. Drinking coffee. Okay, what do they think I do all day, right? Or watching us or whatever they say. But when they see, no, I'm going to be writing too. Now, those of you in the primary grades, think about how wonderful this is, because what do they always do when they're writing? How do you spell? How do you spell, right? I don't know. No, you can't ask me. I'm going to be busy writing. We're all writing. So it really does set as an interesting stage for them. I also want you to think about not showing them the timer. I know that sometimes we use it on our smart boards. In this situation, I prefer not to. I use the stopwatch on my phone and I count up. And the reason I do that is I read the room. If I'm noticing that we're slowing down a little bit, then I'm going to maybe cut it a little bit shorter, go with the 6-minute end of the range instead of the 7-minute, right? But if they're really engaged, all of them are really, I might push a little bit more. So just use that 6 or 7 minutes as a guideline. Here's what I suggest. As you get close to the end of the time, I would say to them, okay, grade 7 writers, I'm going to have you push through for 1 more minute. And then we do. And at the end of that minute, okay, grade 3 writers, I'd like you to finish the sentence that you're on and then quietly read over your work. Now, this is where you build in that rereading. You know, what do students usually do when they're finished writing something? I'm done. They're ready to hand it in. They never read it over. And so we have to train them to do that. And then what always happens, no matter which class, it will always happen where somebody says, oh, I noticed a mistake. Oh, now you can fix it. Now turn that critical thinking brain back on. Of course, now you can fix it, right? I have some prompt ideas for you here. Now, both books are chock full of them, but there's definitely some that they're very simple. Like, keep that in mind. They're very, very simple. Initially, it's just the words, but always give them the prompt. If there's no prompt, they can't rewrite the prompt. So that's what's going to be the trick to get them to keep writing. And you can see I note there, use I remember as a first experience, because we all remember something, and talk it through like I did, and you're going to find success with it. Sometimes you might consider adding an image. Now, I'm going to just show you here. One of the things that you could do is put 2 prompts sometimes with an image. Now, I wouldn't use an image the first time, or even the first few times. I would keep it just with the word prompt initially. But eventually, you can see how powerful this could be. Now, you could also have the students, you could have them write, I am grateful for first, and then write, I am worried about, potentially. Or even better to me is to have them looking at that image and then move between the 2 prompts as needed. If they only write on one, that's okay. If they use both, that's okay too. But the images don't have to be complicated. With our older students, a picture of a newspaper like this, very simply, can be extremely powerful and yield some very powerful writing. The same with a simple picture like this of the world. You have some students who go into more the environmental side. You have some in Edmonton, we have many Syrian refugees, and I was in a classroom and did something like this, and I had students who wrote about what it was like for them to leave their home country, and they wrote about being worried about the family members who were left behind. So extremely powerful. Like, I could never think to tell that student, could you please tell me, I wouldn't know what to say to that student. What would touch a nerve? How would I give that student a topic, right? But you can see how this opens the door very openly, actually, for us to write about what we choose to write about. Reader response is another one, and I'm very conscious of your time as well, and I apologize because we are going to go over a little bit, but I'm going to move as quickly as I can here just to share some practical ideas with you. But I'm just going to maybe go through, I'll show you all 3 of these at once, but just thinking about reader response opportunities, as soon as you use the process of free writing, it opens up the world to this reader response because they just write continuously, and it can be very, very powerful and raw. Now you can see that Up the Creek is more of a humorous, engaging book for that in that way. But if you think about a book about an ordinary day, that's a fairly new book, and it's really about the life cycle. We have the birth of a baby on the same day as the death of a dog in the same neighborhood. Well, even with my upper elementary, junior high students, I would use a book like that and use a reader response prompt, simply, I am thinking about, and it's amazing what it yields for our students. So I love to think of my students as teachers. And one day, that first year, I had introduced free writing with my grade 6 class. All of a sudden, I was in another subject area. And one of my students says, can we free write about this? And I went, yes, we can. And thinking, why didn't I think of that? Why did I keep it within language arts? And instead realize that the students, it was a way for them to process things. And on another day in the same class, I had a student who read his writing to us and then exclaimed, I didn't know I thought that. And so it really made me think about the idea that writing is a form of thinking. So I want to challenge you to think about writing in language arts. Yes, it's writing practice. We're going to teach them those skills. We're going to, get them to be effective writers as well as willful writers. But I also challenge you to use free writing in other areas of the curriculum. And I'm just going to show you very quickly a couple of examples that you can literally use, in any grade level that you teach. You can just take the same idea. Now, I use it at various points of my instruction, sometimes to activate knowledge, right? Or just to get them thinking about a topic. Sometimes I might have it during the learning experiences themselves, even in a makerspace situation. Sometimes I have my students stop and I'll have them do a little free write. Today I discovered, right? Something simple like that. And also, of course, at the end of a lesson or unit can be very effective. Now let's just take this example of rocks and minerals. Now, rocks and minerals is a science unit in many areas of the country at different grade levels, interestingly enough. But think about giving them either a picture like this, or even better, giving them an actual stone to examine and have them write, I notice, I wonder. That's a great way to activate their thinking. During the unit, after doing all sorts of reading, examinations, experiments, whatever you're doing, I think, I read, right? And they're processing some of their learning there. At the end of the unit, you can think about how you could use this to help them kind of culminate their thinking and bring together some of those ideas that you've learned. Now, what I would do in a situation like this is I might brainstorm with them, if you look at the second bullet there, some different categories of things that we've talked about during the unit. So those categories then, think about how naturally we could teach them paragraphing. So today you're going to free write and you're going to touch on some of these different areas. When you start on a new area, make that a new paragraph, right? And you can do that very naturally into this. Now, this could become, as I said, in the third bullet there, you can see it could become the basis of a report potentially, right? But it's a way for them to really get a hold of what they're what they've learned during that unit, to construct that meaning and make sure that they're able to reflect on their learning. Now, just a couple of reminders. I don't think I've ever done this as quickly as I am with you today, and I'm sure I forgot lots of things, but I just wanted to honor your time on this Thursday evening. Remember to write with your students. It is so powerful when you are. It makes a huge difference. I don't narrative write with them. I don't journal write with them, but I do free write with them, okay? Keep the timer for your eyes only. Otherwise, you're going to have some students who get a little bit anxious when they're looking at the time then and not thinking just about their writing. Embed that reading of the writing into that routine. Think about it at the end. Grade 2 writers, you're going to finish the sentence that you're on and now read to yourself what you've written. After that, you're going to open it up for sharing and you're going to say, is there anyone who wants to share all or some of what they wrote today? What amazed me most is that the students who had always been most reluctant in my classroom were the first ones who wanted to share. That happened that first year, and it has happened in so many classrooms since. I go from to class now in our district and also in other districts, and I introduce free writing into all these classrooms, and teachers are amazed. They say to me, that student has never shared their writing ever. And all of a sudden they're sharing on the first experience, right? Keep in mind that you're going to honor that choice for all, some, or none. If they decide to share none on a given day, there might be a reason for it. The only time I might break that promise, and I have done it on occasion, is when I was concerned about a student's safety. You can see that the writing that comes from a free write is very raw, is often emotion filled, right? Which is wonderful, because when you talk about teaching voice, how do we teach voice? Guess what? Free writing does it very naturally, right? It's kind of inherent in the nature of it. But there were 2 occasions where I did have to read a student's writing because I was concerned about their safety. I did tell them first, but just keep that in mind. Honor that choice as much as you can. Now, think about the power. If you have your students writing regularly like this, then what I love to do is I will teach a mini lesson, let's say on word choice, sentence fluency, paragraphing, deliberate repetition, whatever it is. Then I have them choose one of their recent free writes that they go back and revise based on what I taught in the mini lesson. That was another big aha in my classroom and a game changer, because we had this regular writing. So instead of saying, I want you to go generate some new content, and by the way, use the skill I just taught you, that's tough. But instead, I want you to go revise your work based on this skill that I've just taught you. And the writing's already done, and it's just the revision. So it really empowered our students. As you can see, I am passionate about writing, just like Anne and Mary are. And when I think about the situation we're in right now, and Anne and Mary both touched on it a little bit, we are in very unusual circumstances. Some of our students have experienced some trauma. There's a lot of uncertainty. When we think about the power of writing and we think about its power beyond the four walls of our classroom, we want them to understand what a freeing activity it can be as well. So it can also be that coping strategy that our students are using, and we can help them to understand that in our classroom. So that was a very quick overview of free writing. Like I said, I can do a whole day on free writing, but that was the quickest overview I could give you. But hopefully it inspires you to give it a try. And you can take what we talked about today and use it literally tomorrow in your classroom. I invite you to contact me through my website. If you try it and something's not working, or you have questions about it, feel free to contact me, or even to share a success story. I have lots of teachers who email me from across the country saying, I tried it and I can't believe how it's worked, right? Or I have this one student who, and they have a question about it. So thank you again for your time. Thank you to Pembroke and Lionel for helping me with my technical difficulties today. I appreciate it.
That was great. Thank you, Karen. That was maybe just as we bring this to a close, and maybe try to tie the two sessions together there. The whole sort of idea and sort of the way you walked us through the idea of free writing seems, I was looking back at my notes from Anne and Mary and sort of their beliefs. And you check the boxes on every one of them, right? But the examples you were giving and then how you lead them into your practice, it seems like that free writing is kind of one of the foundational things, and you move forward. Do you ever come back to that and sort of tie that into those beliefs? And maybe not exactly how Anne and Mary had it, but is there time that you place for that, so you allow the kids to kind of connect those dots? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh yes, for sure. Because I just like Anne and Mary, I want them to reflect on as writers themselves, think about the process, think about what it's like. And in fact, after the first free writing experience, one of the things that I ask them before we do any sharing on that first day, I actually ask them, how did it feel to free write? And it's so fascinating to hear what they say, because to me, that's what it's about, especially at the beginning, is just breaking those barriers down for those reluctant writers. But one of the best responses I ever got from a student when I asked that question, it was a grade 5 student. And when I said, how did it feel to free write? He said, that was refreshing. And I didn't know the student. He was in a classroom that I was just visiting. And I said, refreshing? Why would you describe it as refreshing? And he said, I just wasn't worried about anything. And he said, this was the best writing I've ever done. So, it accomplishes a couple of things. And I was just so incredibly amazed at how quickly it started to work with my students.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And Penny makes a good comment in the chat as well, that, I have to realize to encourage teachers to do more of this because of the power that it brings to the students, the empowerment it brings. Yeah,
exactly.
Great. Good. Well, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for taking the last half hour or so to just walk us through that and give us some practical examples. And as well, wordschangeworlds.ca is the place to go to for regular updates. So Karen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lionel. Much appreciated.
And for everyone that joined us today on behalf of Pembroke Publishers, thanks so much. It was great to have you here and spend an hour or so on literacy. And we're looking forward to in 2 weeks with our next session, and we hope to see you then. So have a good evening. Take care.